The more things change, the more they stay the same. With another anniversary of my channel's introduction, it's time to take stock. Amazingly, I managed to get over 40 games reviewed this year compared to last year's dozen, so in celebration, we're gonna be looking at who deserves the accolades and who's gonna get some final nut shots for their stupidity with a double top 5 selected through my opinions. So without further delay, let's get cracking! The fifth entry on this list goes to show that even a game made before subtitles were standard can achieve greatness, especially when the plot focuses on the villains. Fifth best game goes to the classic Xbox game Halo 2. The game did exactly what it needed to when you make a trilogy, back up the conflict introduced in the first, and expand it to get the audience hungering for the third game. The second game accomplished this by focusing on the backstory of the Covenant, the unexplained combatants in Halo Combat Evolved that crashed with us into Halo 4. It brings us the religious explanation for their behavior, the reason behind their drive for the Halo devices, and the Arbiter character leading the charge against the irrational preachings of the hierarchs. The writing is a brilliant series of events that works because Bungie went all out to make a galaxy-spanning conflict directly hinge on the actions of the two main characters. If there were flaws, Master Chief definitely got the shaft since his arc is ripped from any 2-bit Call of Duty. Go to a thing, do what we say, and we're not gonna tell you why. The story introduces us to the Arbiter, a soldier who had been blamed for the failure to stop Master Chief and sentenced to death before the hierarchs saved him as a religious enforcer. After learning of the true purpose of the Halo devices from 343 Guilty Spark, we see the hierarchs for what they really are: selfish and power hungry. Two hierarchs end up dead as the Prophet of Truth's plan to be the only transcendent on the Great Journey, which lets you get a feel for how heinously devious he is, and that makes him a great villain. Despite the ending being an atrocity, the game ends up being an immersive and riveting tale of an alien fighting for a betrayed species. He runs the ABCs of a military campaign while the Arbiter does the interesting shit. Although Master Chief did get to punch the Prophet of Regret in the face, and that was actually pretty funny. As Halo began to advance in its years, things had changed for the first-party IP. Bungie dropped off the billing after Halo Reach, and Microsoft created 343 Industries solely to take up the mantle. After that, they made 4 new titles. One of them was a complete mistake, showing that just because you make a game to be cheap, doesn't mean you can get away with it being cheap. That was the idea behind Halo Spartan Assault. Developed with help by Vanguard, a twin-stick shooter developer, the two created this game to be sold on the cheap for $5, and I can respect a game being short if that's the case, but not when you barely try during the process. The game starts with destroying any tension with its framing device of some idiot watching a conflict simulation being conducted by some other nameless twit that we're going to be piloting for the next 3 hours. Then the first mission starts and drowns the rest of the potential with its slippery controls. You can't target anything, and the lack of a reticle makes randomly shooting in a direction the best option. The grenades are useless. You have to upgrade your starting weapons every time you beat a chapter, instead of it being some part of a metagame, and the vehicles are nearly uncontrollable and easily destroyed due to constant off-screen attacks. The actual plot of this story is straight from the Call of Duty Mad Lib book. Go to place A and defend something. Go to place B and invade. Go to place C and get plot device to win. And lastly, what dumbass decided to put this stupid border on screen for the whole game? It makes it look completely awful. The game can be completed within 3 hours, and despite that, you'll have no idea what's going on until the end, and when the credits even roll, you'll wonder why 343 even bothered. Like all games on my top 5, they were all surprises, and it's no exception here. This game I had deliberately avoided any contact with because of my previous racism towards it, and this entry is my sincere apology towards its kind, because the number 4 best game of 2016 was the MSX2 classic Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. This 25-year-old game blew all of my preconceived notions about retro games out of the water, because this thing was developed to run on Japanese personal computers, and and in spite of that, it managed enough content and Kojima-esque storytelling to feel like a true two-dimensional Metal Gear Solid. It has it all, really. Ridiculous puzzles, the military-grade story, the anime characters, horrendous dialogue, and above all, hard-hitting boss fights. Actual characters that have something to say, and they're gonna shove it down your throat until you get it. Metal Gear 2 is a surprisingly well-paced retro game since the game adopts the traditional 3-phase alert status from the entire series. The guards aren't infinite or hard to kill, and the game has a checkpoint system that means you won't have to start over from a half hour ago just because you got caught in a 3-person pileup. It's an impressive stealth game that benefits from excellent animation and a wide slew of devices and hiding places. Tie that with some impressive set pieces and a story that wants you to be involved in the overthrowing of Zanzibar land, and it feels like the real first game that came from the insane mind of Hideo Kojima, and it's been the justification for every Metal Gear game that followed. The amazing thing about Metal Gear 2, and what honestly blew me away after I thought about it, was that this game was developed for the same console as the mediocre Metal Gear 1. It's another success story that proves that it's not what you got, it's what you do with it. Moving back to the other side in two senses of the word, we move to the modern era with a game that got panned down to the bottom of the barrel for only one reason. A diabolical reason that tainted the rest of its 5-hour runtime. Let me reintroduce you to the number 4 worst game of the year, Call of Duty Ghosts. As you may have noticed, narratives hit pretty hard with me when I'm video gaming. Great ones can carry a whole game, and shitty ones drown out the entire pie, and Call of Duty Ghosts has one of the worst. The main conflict of this game, get this, you're gonna love it, is that South America had been condensed by an unseen villain that turned it into the Federation, and for no logical idea, they decide to attack America using its death satellite. Then they invade it and try to take it all for themselves. I take issue with Steven Gagon's villain because he's a literal 10 times more evil than Hitler just because he needed one. But mostly because the plot for this game makes no fucking sense. You have a game that's trying to be set in reality, but the plot can only make sense using cartoon logic. The game tries to establish that within 20 minutes of the Federation controlling the Death Satellite, the entire country of America was crippled, despite the game showing us directly that the most a missile can destroy is about 50 square miles, and even giving the most generous assumptions, their entire attack would have destroyed less than 10% of this country. Then there's the fact that they establish an energy crisis before the conflict ever happened, and even with the entirety of South America piled together, they have no way beaten us in military might. And since no one can produce weapons due to lack of oil, they would have been beaten hands over fists. Not only was Call of Duty Ghosts written by a paranoid nutjob, but apparently they were also a giant idiot because this thing is riddled with crater-sized plot holes. If Infinity Ward had just stuck to using the Ghost Killer as the main antagonist, the game would have been great, and because he was added to the game is why I placed the blame solely on their celebrity contributor Gagon. Not all of the greatest shooting playtime and the gimmick craziness in the world is gonna matter if you start with a foundation of wet cardboard. When Ghost 2 is released, it needs a lot to prove itself. For the third entry in this list, it was the one game that I knew was gonna be on the top right after I reviewed it. And yes, I do understand that when I say it like that, it's a bit unfair, but you have to remember, we're talking about Halo Reach here, folks. The last game developed by Bungie before they left to further their quest of world domination. The game's not impressive because it has intuitive combat, not because of its great characters, and even though it's really fun. The thing that makes it reach levels of amazing and masterpiece is within a group of hack job, half-ass prequels riddled with plot holes and bullshit. Halo Reach stands above as one that makes it work in every single way. It starts on Reach, a planet about to be paid an abusive visit by the Covenant, and the members of Halo Team have to investigate their arrival. It takes them through a microcosm of humanity's fruits they've cultivated on Reach, and what's being lost when it finally falls. The facilities, the cities, and above all, the artifacts. And by the end, it'll be the latchkey that saves Earth from ultimate destruction. Noble Team recovers Cortana with knowledge about the Halo devices before a total annihilation thanks to Noble Six's decision to stay behind and make sure of it, knowing that his fate is sealed in doing so. Halo Reach correctly sets up the game's universe and supports the world building already in place to explain how the Pillar of Autumn found Halo 04 in the first place, and it does this while the stranded Noble Team are having a death sprint. Every character knows that Reach is fucked, no matter how they slice it, and each does their best to salvage something out of the foregone conclusion. Their lives are forfeit due to the invasion. All they have to do is survive as long as possible. It doesn't end up being Call of Duty, let's kill off a character because the formula says so, since everyone mattered in their final moments, with the exception of the one that got killed by a random bullet ex machina. Halo Reach stands as my favorite iteration in the series for showing off what sort of amazing takeaway you can have when you put your all into it. And speaking of... Now, when a game fails, it's already bad. People turn away from buying it, the lost revenue can cripple a developer, and ultimately it hurts the industry as a whole. However, when a game fails so hard that it destroys the chance of future games, that's when you get atrocities. And no other game was a more hackneyed disaster than the Xbone exclusive Halo 5 Guardians. I didn't just want to put this game on my shit list, I needed to, because this game was so instrumental in the selling of Xbones that it was on its games list for 2 years before its release. And when it did come out, it was highly Microsoft branded Xbox One exclusive. This game was a stone cold serious system seller, and you ruined it on every level. From the 10-hour day one install to the abysmal execution of the source material, and I mean literal death, because this game proved a few things. One, that console gaming was so akin to PC gaming now that I wanted to vomit with how many disadvantages you stuffed into the black box Xbone. 2, that Halo 6 was now going to be this preemptive 10-car pileup since you fucked up the most important game of the series. And finally, 343 has no clue what it's doing. I gave the developer the benefit of the doubt when I covered Halo 4, because it was supposed to be the establishing of the conflict in the new generation of Halo, but that wasn't the case. You made a boring game because you have no ability to create intrigue. You're so freaking humble, 343, that you're not pushing the envelope and not doing anything new. The development of Halo 5 was such a joke that literally one of the plot devices this game had functioned in the exact same way as one from Halo 4. You boiled down the most promising of science fiction series in video gaming down to a shitty Call of Duty clone where the only thing to do in the entire 5 hours is follow the leader. Master Chief is trying to find Cortana for the whole game, and the other group is trying to find the Master Chief. Oh, and let's not forget this is an online-only Xbox Live paywalled co-op game, and it has microtransactions because of course it does. Good luck trying to crawl out of this hole you dug with Halo 6 bugger nuts. You're gonna need it. If I have anything to say this year, it's that my number 2 pick was the most surprised by a game I've ever been. The reason is that no one gives a shit about it, and most likely nobody even made it past the first half of it. I know I'm in the extreme minority, but I don't care because more people need to play or emulate Metal Gear Acid. From the first meeting onwards, it must have been a nail-biting fight to the dirt to try and tie a stealth game to a card game, and even when the release date came, it only barely worked. Stealth is impossible in the game because enemies move unpredictably, so your best bet is to try and prepare for killing and running as fast as you can. It's the game's biggest flaw, and the mechanics make it incredibly dense, since it clocked in at about 20 hours. And beyond that, there's minimal animation, and the graphics definitely scream mid-2000s handheld, especially with its flipbook cutscenes. Thankfully, it wasn't as much a hack job as Roads to Victory, so why did the game hit number 2 of 2016? It's the plot. The story of this game is network television grade, and while I can understand the objections that the story of the game has no focus, it proves that you need to push through the bad to get to the end, because that's where it gets justified. Just like a TV finale episode, you need to keep with it to figure out what it all meant. Despite the game having 7 antagonists, they all come from the same place. I'm not gonna spoil what it is here, but it's an ending that'll get lodged in your head and have you scrambling to figure out what it all meant. After 20 hours of creeping around this dark place with well-placed FAMAS kills trying to not get found, and wondering what sort of baddie is gonna pop out of the dark corner next, the final turn will show you the dark secret of Lobito Island and why the legendary Solid Snake was the only man capable of the mission. The game has masterful atmosphere that'll get you immersed, and it was executed so well that Lobito Island has a good chance to dethrone Shadow Moses Island for best Metal Gear location. Trust me, if you humor the game, you'll get satisfaction from it in spades. Halo 5 Guardians was lazy garbage, but the reason it didn't get lower than this is because the last two are maliciously moronic and disrespectful members of their series. Developers who were given a license that they used to smack their benefactors upside the face and stomp on their toes. And what better place to start than the early Vita title, Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. This game is what happens when developers start internalizing the idea that Call of Duty is supposed to not be taken seriously. So all you have to do is slap a campaign to a multiplayer server and people will buy it because. Obviously, no one is going to buy a console for a game like My Horse and Me, and that's why this game gets its deservedly bum rap. Like it or not, Call of Duty games are gonna be system sellers, and people do expect some form of quality with the pedigree, and this game's sinful disrespect to the series is how it ended up at number 2 worst. Its campaign is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Every mission is completely disconnected from each other, feeling more like a hackneyed mission pack than some sort of sneaking to the top and killing the main antagonist, of whom we only see once when we're pulling a bullet through its gormless face. The game weakly tries to justify itself with simple corridor shooting and intuitive controls made from concrete. Enemies who can take you apart in seconds, yet conversely can barely navigate corners and get blown up by their own grenades. Also, this game has no checkpoints. Why? Because each mission in the campaign is 3 minutes long, totaling 2 hours of gameplay. Yeah, this game has less content in it than Spartan Assault, and it was sold as a full package deal. Combine that with a useless RPG mechanic giving you level ups in single player, no core idea of what it's doing, and getting back the voice actors from Black Ops 1, you've got the worst game on the PlayStation Vita. Okay, now it's time to give out the true accolade. The best game reviewed in 2015. Now, the other games of this list were surprisingly great in their series, but this is the only game that I've come across this year that's a true mold breaker, and it happens to be Call of Duty Black Ops 3. Yes, I know what some of you are thinking. You only like that because it's the newest one and you just play multiplayer on it all the time because you're a dumb PC gamer, and only people who play on the PS4 are the real deal. I know I can't stop people from thinking that way because they're trolls and idiots or both. But if you want to pick apart my opinion, remember I shat all over Halo 5 and that was released after this game. So shut up and bear with me here. I truly loved Black Ops 3's campaign. It was a breath of fresh air for a series that had become stale over many years because developers let that happen. But then Treyarch did what they do best, and that's pseudo science fiction. Black Ops 1 had a bit of sci-fi in its hardline military thriller, but this one was true blue sci-fi. It's set in the future, so it had its own rules about out what its technology could do, and from that came the mystery villain. Throughout the plot, there's this mystery that keeps getting built up as the player and his two friends investigate an illegal weapons experiment that killed 300,000 in Singapore. The game does this brilliantly because, like Metal Gear Acid, the plot is always on the move and every character becomes a suspect before realizing that there's something else in the background that we hadn't seen until now pulling the strings. And you keep getting more and more immersed until the last bad guy left turns out to be yourself, and the player thinks this ends in suicide. But no, that didn't solve anything. You're then sucked into the afterlife to finally confront the main villain. The mystery of Black Ops 3 is why it gets top billing, because it's told expertly and has brilliant pacing throughout the whole 6 hours, and with only a few chinks, such as the Singapore criminal twins that add absolutely nothing to the story. I chose this game, not only because it was a masterpiece in its own right with a great twist ending that manages to have deliberately missing details, yet still make a great conclusion, but it's because Call of Duty Black Ops 3 is the game that is gonna put Call of Duty back in the spotlight as a series that can be taken seriously once again. This bullshit ideology that just because it's Call of Duty means it's gonna be one-note corridor shooting is dead, because Black Ops 3 proves that even a Call of Duty story can be immersive, intriguing, and an amazing experience using innovative mechanics. It's the new mold breaker of the series, and just like COD 4, all future titles are going to be judged accordingly against its example. Okay, before we start on this one, I'm gonna level with you guys. My pick for the game mining underneath the bottom of the barrel was so mind-bogglingly reprehensible that I had to censor my bottom 5, because the games came from a developer that never learned from its mistakes, even though they were consistently producing the worst excuses for video games I've ever seen. For variety's sake, I only wanted to include the worst of the worst. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 1 worst video game of 2015 is Call of Duty Black Ops DS. Lord Almighty, where do you even start with this mountain of garbage? Let's start with the developer, N-Space. Before recording this list, I censored 2 other N-Space games from my bottom 5, which were Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare DS and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 Defiance. These idiots, these hack jobs, had developed 5 Call of Duty games, and 3 of them ended up on my shit list. The reason why this happened is because N-Space had been through a disrespectful time in its history, a sort of seasonal rot for a corporation. There was a 5-year period where N-Space was living off of one of 2 things: shitty license jobs and the favor of the AAA industry. Call of Duty Black Ops DS came from the former, and the latter came from jobs like Disney Infinity, where the publisher wanted to get it out on literally every console that existed. N-Space took the 3DS and DS versions of those games. In each of those 5 years, N-Space was working on anywhere from 2 to 4 games, proving that they weren't in the industry to make games, they were in it to make money. And it goes to show from their worst Call of Duty game. The game's problems only start with the horrendous characters, locations, and animation that looks like it should be home on early PSP. The first titanic problem is with the story. Now, the original Black Ops 1 had a great plot. It was a mystery thriller concerning a brainwashed CIA man trying to figure out what a bunch of numbers were through flashbacks that ended up with him attempting to assassinate President Kennedy. N-Space took that idea and fed it through a meat grinder, decided that Black Ops DS's framing device was going to be centered around a debriefing. This entire game is built around some stooge and his superior officer discussing a report of what happened on a mission. The shit doesn't end there, obviously. Just like all other N-Space games, they still didn't bother to get a composer or the right MIDI tools for the game, so the music just starts up and cuts out at complete random between locations. Yet, even when you get to point B, the controls are atrociously unplayable. You have to pick between either a button or a stylus control scheme, and they're both slippery and uselessly complicated, with their 3 buttons requirements to actually shoot people. What makes this worse is that it has the most retarded combat I've ever seen. N-Space took the lessened health from Black Ops 1 and slashed it in half for Black Ops DS to where literally 4 bullets will kill you. To get any progress, you have to tiptoe everywhere, because if you hit a programming flag, suddenly you have 4 guys spawn in and they take you apart in seconds. The unplayability of the game comes alive in the retaking of the beach, which is so impossible that it has game facts pages dedicated to it. This game is a disrespectful stab in the back meant to try and con non-gamers into buying it for DS consumers, thinking it's the same thing as Black Ops 1, when they're really buying an inferior joke. This is the worst type of game that comes from a company trying to make money off of a name instead of creating content. An unplayable piece of garbage which should only result in automatic refunds. And with the worst game of 2015 shown yet again, we look ahead to the next year of reviews and hopefully they'll bring us more to appreciate. But until then, I will leave you with a victory for gamers. I'll see you next week. Have a good one.